Hello everyone, welcome once again to A.O.S Academy's YouTube channel. Here we'll talk about language studies for French, Chinese, Spanish. We also talk about exam preparation for IELTS, TOEFL, TEF Canada, TCF, DEF examinations. Likewise, we work on research. We'll talk about research, how to help yourself improve on your project, your thesis and dissertation works. Today, we want to continue on our series on research, and we'll be talking about the processes that are involved in a particular research project. A lot of you perhaps have started working on researches, especially if you are a student in maybe your undergraduate programs, or maybe even a postgraduate student for masters or even your PhD. And perhaps you want to refresh your knowledge, or you want to even learn how to work on your research, because definitely not all schools, especially in Nigeria, talks about or assist students on working on their own research or learning about how to actually come up with their own research. So before we talk about it, kindly subscribe to this YouTube channel and hit on the notification bell in order to get updated anytime we drop a content like this. And please also like and share this video with your friends and your colleagues in school. So I would like to talk about the processes involved in research today on this channel. There are at least 5 to 6 different steps you have to follow as a researcher if you want to come up with a wonderful research yourself. And these steps or processes are basically all the steps you need to know, that you need to use, and you need to abide by, not only on your final year project for your undergraduate studies, but also for even masters and dissertation theses and dissertations, and even you working on articles, papers, journals, scripts. You understand that you would perhaps publish on your university's website, on articles and even journals and conferences out there. So the very first thing you need to note, which is the process 1 or the step 1 to having a wonderful research project or write-up, is first of all the identification of a researchable problem. They are not always problems that are researchable, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. If you want to carry out a research, you need to look for a problem that you know, firstly, people are dealing with, that are like real life, talking about real life situations, what people are tackling at their particular stage in time, or what, for instance, they have tackled that you want to find out about. Maybe what caused it, you understand, the kind of things you are trying to bring out. Take, for instance, in the data science field, if we want to carry out a project, in my own master's program, for instance, I've carried out a project that relates to the government regulations and promotions of spatial data analysis in data center administration, or maybe even project petrol, or maybe a particular sector. It can be a particular sector, maybe like the petroleum or the education sector. Now, if you look at that research problem or research topic rather, you would see that the topic is more or less researchable, because it talks about government promotion, government regulation. In other words, it's going to be looking at the policies that have been set aside by maybe the Nigerian government in order to tackle spatial data analysis in a particular sector, maybe the education sector, or maybe in data center administration, a field of work. Now, if you look at that, you will see that it is a real life problem that would help you think deeply about, firstly, what the government are doing to combat the problems in the data centers, and also to look inwardly to see what can be done better in order to promote the use of spatial data analysis in data centers. So that being said, you have to look for a research topic that is not just only a topic, but a researchable problem that you want to combat, that you want to find solutions to. That topic that I talked about now, we could bring about solutions for the government in looking at the policies they have on ground, looking at the excesses or the weaknesses of those policies, and how they could combat it to have better policies afterwards. Now, the next thing is for you to bring about a clear and concise statement of research problem. A lot of people don't have concise statements that they could bring up, that they could tender for a research problem. The fact that you have a research topic doesn't mean you already have a research problem. That research topic I talked about in the government sector could have different problems that one researcher is looking to actually find out and another researcher is not even thinking about. Take, for instance, I talked about the weaknesses of the certain policies and how to bring about better policy making. Another person may look at the strategies that government could use to regulate or to promote the policies to not just the government workers, but even the companies, the organizations. So you have to tailor your research problems based on what you feel you can get material, and that will be maybe like the next step. The next step is for you to actually formulate necessary research questions and or appropriate research hypotheses. I wanted to talk about something. If, for instance, your problem is to look at the policies, just like the first one we talked about, look at the policies, the weaknesses of those policies, and how to advise, how to recommend solutions for the government to tackle the weaknesses of those policies. Your first research question in that instance may be, what are the available policies made by the government to regulate data centers or to regulate spatial data analysis in data centers? That may be the first question. The next question may be, what are the weaknesses or what are the disadvantages or what are the shortcomings of those policies towards the data center administrators and all other professionals? Do you understand? And you can have about 4 to 5 different research questions that would center on that particular research problem. So you have to either bring up research questions or even bring up research hypotheses. Research hypotheses, like for the alternate hypothesis, it may be that from that research problem, you want to state that there are weaknesses in the government policies that helps in the regulation of spatial data analysis in data centers. And your null hypothesis may be there are no weaknesses or there are no shortcomings within the policies of the government that helps to regulate the spatial data analysis in data centers. That could be your alternate hypothesis and null hypothesis. Moving on, the fourth step towards your research is the collection of required data for the research. A lot of people, I think I've talked about the types of data you need to collect for research. I would leave the link below this video, and you can also hit on the timestamp in order to go to the video where I talk about the different data that you have for a particular research. But in order to brief it here, if you want to collect a data for your research, the very first thing is that you have to make use of what we call instruments, either your questionnaires, your direct observation, your interviews, or even all other documentary sources. And you are going to get 2 to 3 forms of data. Firstly, you will get the secondary data, which are the data that you get in libraries, in archives, without necessarily going to the field. And the second kind of data is the primary data, the one you have to be involved in collecting the raw data from the community or from the case study. Do you understand? Now, a perfect example of secondary data may be policies, the written down policies of the government in constitutions, for instance, or in regulatory bodies, for instance. While the primary data that you can collect may be going to the organizations, the government organizations, to carry out interviews with those who are who are regulating those policies and those who are formulating or making sure that those policies are being promoted to the data centers. Now, the next thing or the next step is the presentation for analysis and the discussion of the data collected. After you have collected the data, the next thing for you to do while you are working on your research is to first of all present the data that you have gotten in your research. Do you understand? In line with the secondary data that you have collected, which we would know as the literature review that you have collected, and juxtaposing the two of them in such a way that you also look at what has been done in the past by all other researchers in terms of the policies, for instance, which is part of the research problem we're kind of battling in this scenario, and discussing the data that you now already have in line with what people have done in the past, now bringing up a kind of synergy between them and now inputting your own contribution in the research that, okay, because of how you collected the data, what you found out from the data is so and so in the discussion of the findings. And after that, now bringing up, which is the next and the final step, drawing inferences, conclusions, and recommendations from your analysis. After you have analyzed the data, maybe you got about 3 different policies of the government that talked about how they regulate spatial data analysis in data centers, then you will now look at them that, okay, this also policy lacks the promotion or lacks the ability of making use of the spatial data analysis in the data centers. Maybe, for instance, the data center administrators do not know how to implement those policies or have difficulty in implementing those policies. A particular policy may be the adoption of maybe ArcGIS. ArcGIS is a software used for spatial data analysis. Maybe the implementation of ArcGIS into their spatial data analysis. And it has been found out through your own research that the data center administrators do not have knowledge or they don't have technical know-how about the adoption of ArcGIS. Maybe, for instance, they are still using Spatial Light, you understand, which is another software. In other words, the policy has not been implemented because of lack of skill or lack of expertise in the use of that software. As a result of that, they might be needing another policy that would help with the training of staff, the training of data center administrators in line with the new software that want to be adopted in that line of work. So as a result of that, you have to draw inferences, you have to conclude, you have to bring about conclusions about what you found out, and you have to give recommendations. If, for instance, your project is related to helping the government know where their weaknesses, their shortcomings lie, you need to now make recommendations for the government to improve on their policy making. You need to also make recommendations for current or rather subsequent researchers who would continue from where you stopped, you understand, your own research, and give them kind of responsibilities, assign responsibilities for them to actually embark on while they are actually carrying out their own research. So those are the 6 major steps or policy or processes that you need to undergo while actually involving in a research project. I'll take them again. The first one is finding a researchable problem. The second one is giving a clear and concise research problem. The next one is formulating research questions or appropriate research hypotheses. The next one is collecting required data for the research, data collection. The next one is presenting for analysis and discussing the data collected. And the last one is drawing inferences, conclusions, and recommendations from your analysis. So if you really enjoyed this, please try as much as possible to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Hit on the notification bell in order to get notified anytime we drop a content, and also like and share this video with all other students like you who are in the process of embarking on their own research, whether be it for projects, for theses or dissertation works, and also come back to get other nuggets about research and how to embark on it later on in your career. Thank you very much, and I do hope you enjoyed this. Kindly subscribe to actually follow us on all other videos we are going to be sharing again. Thank you very much, and do have a lovely day ahead. Bye for now.